Though I have indeed seen teachers teach without having the instrument, which is wild to me. All right, so we got our A. Tune it up. E. All right, so you have a question about vibrato. So, yeah, I mean, have you ever tried vibrato before? That's my first question.
Yeah. I've been trying to practice it at least since that class.
Okay, great. Can I see what it looks like so far?
With me playing.
Yeah. Just
Okay.
put like third finger on A.
Okay.
Not bad. Is your bow on the A string?
Yeah.
That sounded very low for A. Okay. I think it looked like, it was funny because it looked like your bow was on A, but it sounded like your bow was on D. It was really weird. Give it to me again.
Oh, I know why.
Oh.
Okay. Sorry. No, it was.
Yep, not bad. Now that I can identify your number one problem. The problem is you're bowing already, and that can be actually very complicated to be doing something with the left hand and trying to keep steady with the right hand when you're very first starting vibrato. So here's what I would recommend. Don't use the bow. Let me see what it looks like now with no bow, just trying to make that motion. That looks pretty good. Yeah, that looks good. Miriam, can you back up? Or, yeah, this way I can see. Okay, good. So 3, I find is the easiest finger. A lot of people agree with me. I think 2 is the second easiest. So let's start with third finger, right? Ring finger. Some people find it helpful to come into third position. So if you put the 1 where the third tape is, and then still put your 3 down, it should kind of bang against the instrument. So what you want to do is you can keep your wrist straight, and then you can try to aim to hit it. So you're pulling your arm, you're not moving the finger, but the finger is moving because it's attached to the arm and it's planted on the fingerboard. So if you pull in, like let's say it kind of feels like this. Let's say your violin was away and you put it in. You know how my arm is bending? So it's really the same thing, except you're holding the violin there and then you're pushing in. Oh, that looks pretty good. Now, I know that your violin is moving a little bit. The truth is when you're doing vibrato, like I'm going to not hold it down. The violin is moving. The difference is my head, it's one of 2 times that your head actually does have to press down. Because you know why? When, like, let's say you're shifting up, you don't actually need your chin or your jaw, but when you can't downshift without holding it, right? So it's actually very similar for vibrato. Because, like, let's say we do a quick silent upshift, and then try to downshift, you have to hold it. There's no other way. And so you have a shoulder rest, which makes you feel, it kind of is fine, but it kind of takes away from the feeling of what is doing what. So when you have the shoulder rest and everything's perfectly there, you're like, oh yeah, well my head's just there the whole time. But the truth is, when you're doing vibrato it is kind of nice to think, I think it can be helpful to think of like, okay, technically when you're going that, like really slow motion, that direction on vibrato, it is pulling the violin away. But you're holding it down. And then when you're doing the forward part of vibrato, because it's always back and forth and back and forth, when you're doing the forward part, it is pushing it in. So if your violin jiggles while you're doing it, that's perfectly fine. It just means that your head's not used to holding it during that. So actually, I think if your violin is jiggling, it actually means you're on the right path. Because if your violin wasn't doing that, it means you're very far off. Okay, so that was looking really good, Angie. And that was a nice wrist vibrato there. So yeah, that looks really good. All right, so do it on the third finger. Let's say 3 on A, because A is a bit closer. You don't have to like reach over as much. All right, so everyone just give me a silent vibrato on A. Okay, and if you're not sure what to do, I love this exercise where you're polishing the string. So I mean, you could actually put a piece of paper or a cloth there, but all you have to do is you can pretend there's one there. And it's kind of like shifting. You're shifting up and down and up and down. And of course, you're keeping contact. So you can keep contact with all 4 fingers if you want, or you're welcome to keep it with just 1 finger. Like I said, 3 is nice to start with. So we got 3 sliding up and down. Okay, and you notice my hand is so relaxed that it is my wrist is kind of moving as I'm doing it. If you do sudden jerky movements, I mean, it's close, it's somewhat there. What if you were swimming through the water? What would it look like? You can't have like angular movements during that, right? Yeah, that's good. And that's kind of the idea. If you were polishing it, you're not going to be like, you know, you're polishing it. That's what it would look like. Just
when you're doing the vibrato, are you pushing all the way down in the string? And
it's vital.
Okay, so all the way down so that it touches it, and then it doesn't like go up and down, right? When you're doing.
It doesn't. No.
Okay.
No. There's a version of vibrato for fiddle where you kind of half press down, but normally it's not like a trampoline for a vibrato. It's just like a little ornament once to make a bit of a slide, a kind of a coming up to the pitch sound. So this motion, this trampoline is not vibrato. The wiggle is vibrato, and obviously I know the wiggle takes a lot of work for a lot of people. I would say like 2 in 10 out of people just somehow just naturally can get it. I can't explain why. I hope to understand that one day. So okay, let's keep polishing. Let's do this 3rd finger polish. Angie, that's looking good. Now here's the thing, you got to take your arm with you. I want you to take your arm with you. So bend the elbow. Good. Okay, now let's do 2nd finger polishing. So 2 is doing it. Let's do 1st finger. So of course you're going to feel the string pressing on your finger the whole time. And let's go crazy. Let's do 4th finger polishing. So for this, I'm not looking for you to press. I just want you to feel the string as you're going. And the reason why is I want you to maintain contact. The sliding motion of the finger on the string technically has nothing to do with vibrato because your finger is going to be planted. It's going to be totally in that spot. But what's happening is your arm is doing the same motion. So let's say we go back to 3 now, because by the way, the fingers I just told you, 3, 2, 1, 4, to me, that's the easiest order to practice vibrato with those particular fingers. So let's go back to 3, right? We're polishing the string. And I have kind of a, 8-inch, 7-inch area that I'm covering. So now what if I make it 6 inches, 5 inches, 4 inches, small, okay, that's not 4. Okay, smaller, smaller, smaller. Okay, notice that my index finger is there is some friction on the fingerboard, but I'm not clamping, so I'm not stuck. But it is lightly grazing the side of the neck here. Okay, so I'm still doing my polishing, and I can go smaller, smaller, smaller until I'm stuck, and my arm is still doing the motion, but my finger is in the same place. Sometimes it's hard for people to plant it and keep doing the arm motion. In that case, just keep doing that, and then just get really, really small. And then, like for me, it's actually stopping at the index finger in terms of friction. And then just put your finger down. I'm going to keep my pinky kind of curled so you can see, even though it's not really proper to do that. But I'm going to show you can see my 3rd finger better. And then my arm is still doing this bending in and out motion, right? Smaller and smaller. And this is the exact motion that you're going to do for vibrato. This is specifically describing an arm vibrato. There's also a wrist vibrato, which is a completely different feeling than that. But I think it's nice to start with something a bit easier. So I personally think arm vibrato is easier. That's just me. People seem to have natural tendencies towards the different ones. Okay, so then, Yeah, that looks good, Angie. Miriam,
The arm one seems easier than like the wrist one, which is what we went over in the class.
Yes, I kind of covered both, but yes, I agree. Okay, Catherine, let me see that. Oh, also, you want to get it more in your shoulder because it's kind of in the middle of your chest, and that can be hard, especially for arm. But actually, Angie, what's funny is at the beginning here when you showed me, you were doing kind of a wrist vibrato or a combination. Combinations are fine, too.
Okay.
The different types of vibrato can be used in different situations. So let's say you want to have, a warmer feeling, and you want like a thicker part of the pad of your finger acting, you might go for more of the wrist one because it can cover kind of a wider area. So they have different uses. Okay, Catherine, good. The polishing one you could do for like 1 week or more weeks just to get used to the feeling of doing that. If you've never tried anything before, highly recommend. And Miriam, you want to make sure that you have the right finger attitude while doing that. So finger attitude is like the shape of your fingers, right? So if you normally play like this with rounded fingers, then you want to keep that shape as you're doing the polishing. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of an unrealistic situation. And keep those fingers as you normally would have them. In fact, you could always put them down as you normally play and then lighten up and do that polishing. And again, I'm not looking for pressing. That's not what I'm going for. I just want to get the feeling in the arm. And after that, what you would do to practice this, I would do 3 on A. I think that's a nice, easy spot to start. So I would practice this as an arm vibrato. I'm pressing down, by the way, really hard because I don't want it to sound like this. Okay, extreme version of not staying put while you're doing that arm motion. So if I'm doing the arm, I'll go in slow motion. If I'm doing the arm motion, but my finger isn't staying put, and even on a small scale, if there's surface area that's changing, sorry, that's not, I didn't want to say that. If the spot is physically changing, it's gonna change the sound too much. In truth, yes, vibrato is going under, and well, actually, vibrato is best described as, I've seen it described 2 ways. One is, so if I have the pitch, let's say this book is my chart here. So let's say the middle of the book is the exact pitch, like A440, and then let's say this is lower. So some people describe it as going lower and then past and then higher and then lower and then higher. The middle of the book is the right. But I've seen other people describe it, which I think I would go with more, is low. You start lower then, and then you go up to the note. So the highest pitch is the actual pitch of the note. Like let's say A440. So like let's say you're at, I don't know, A439, and you come down and you hit it and you come back and you hit it and you come back and you hit it and you come back. So you're supposed to have only the highest pitch be the actual note. Apparently that's what registers in people's minds as like, oh, there's that note. But then if you go beyond it, it could just sound like an out of tune vibrato. So when I wanted to describe that because when you're doing vibrato, yes, technically the hertz, like the frequency of the note that you're doing does change. And in slow motion, it would sound like this, where it goes lower and then higher. But when you're going fast, it sounds like that. Now my finger isn't sliding, but it is true that because my finger is angled this way, it's lower. And because my finger is angled this way, it's higher because where the precise point where the maximum pressure is on my finger changes. And it's the same thing when I tell people when I'm in a private lesson and I go, you're so close, just like when they're very new, and I'm like, you're so close, just go the tiniest bit higher. And then they go like let's say they're here. And they go like, okay, that's not it. Or if they go and they slide their finger, it's always going to be too high. So I tell them, no, you just have to angle it differently to get it there. So the angle of the finger changes the pitch that is coming out. So if you pull it back, so notice my finger is a bit flatter right now, very less rounded, right? Now I'm not going to go totally flat because it's going to make my finger out of control. Like I don't want it to lock in. But like if you think of the ideal shape as a square, where this little bone is parallel to this bone. If you think of that as the ideal shape, let's make that with 3. Do anything it takes to make that with third finger. Then if you pull backwards and make that finger less square, a lot less square, get different angles. Okay, there we go, a lot less square. And then you come back to being a square. That's going to change the pitch a lot. And that is one other vibrato exercise. So let's say I'm at the pitch. I'm at the pitch, and then I pull my hand back, and my arm opened, if you saw that. So I pull my arm back, and now the pitch is going to be lower. I don't know if you can hear, if you have practiced enough to be able to hear that. But it does take a little bit of ear training, or you know how you do something a lot, and then you get really sensitive to the minutia, like wine connoisseurs, coffee connoisseurs like myself, or if you just practice the violin a lot. So I don't personally think this comes from every instrument. I do think when it's extremely fine-tuned, like a string instrument, and especially violin, I think this is more prevalent, where you're really like fine-tuning your perceptions on the sound. So if you don't hear that yet, that's completely fine. You just have to trust me that when it's squared, it sounds higher than when you pull back. You make the finger less squared. I'll pull my pinky out of the way. And then square it again. Higher. This is an exercise, and you should practice it because it's the number one way you're doing vibrato. Actually, whether you're doing wrist or arm, that getting those two sounds are really just all vibrato is, and then just doing it faster and more smoothly. The most common error that I see students doing when they're trying to learn vibrato is that they're trying to go wicked fast, but they don't need to. So if they're, let's say you're doing like, a lot of students will be like, which just isn't necessary, especially for the pieces that they're doing the vibrato in. Let's say it's something really nice, like, so fiddle doesn't normally have vibrato, but let's say you were doing the Skyboat song that we're learning, like, I don't even want it to sound like this. I don't want it to sound like that. So there's fast and there's slow vibrato, and there's wide and there's narrow vibrato. And I find that students make it way too hard on themselves by trying to go as fast as possible on the vibrato. And when I tell them to slow down, it significantly improves their vibrato, and they're doing it already. So I would say my number one tip is probably slow down from whatever you were doing, because there are absolutely applications for even very slow and very narrow vibrato. So like in this case of this fiddle song, it is okay to do a little bit of vibrato to warm it up. So that means that you're not going to go as far as you can go on the spectrum of the note, so to speak, in the vibrato. But you're going to go a little bit, and you're going to do it not super frequently. So I might go like, so I just give a tiny one. I just give a little tiny guy. You can almost challenge yourself, and I did this when I was learning cello. What is the smallest amount of vibrato that I can do? What is the smallest width? And what is the least frequent vibrato that I can do? That is going to usually sound very good. And it's safe too. That's the smallest I can do. And even that, I feel like for fiddle, it might be like slightly too much. Classical players tend to go crazy on vibrato by default, which isn't always applicable in every situation. Even in the classical world, I mean, like as you go through the time development of Baroque to classical to Romantic to modern, they all have different requirements of vibrato. Of course, somebody can say like, well, I don't want to do it that way, and I want to do it my way, and I want to go crazy on vibrato, and that's fine if they're knowingly doing that. But it's just not always called for to be insanely wide and fast. You know what I mean? So my tip is slow down on it because it's probably going to sound better than what you're doing. Just in my experience, I could blindly say that. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. Okay, great. Yeah, mainly I think the polishing and the make it from square to, you're going this, pull it back, this, pull it back.
The polishing, I think it's really, I was like, the polishing is really like kind of helping me understand that motion.
Yeah, I agree.
More, yeah. I feel like I was able to just like get it a few times more than I was before. So
yeah, and then the other one is good for keeping your joints, I guess I could say pliable or loose. So because a lot of people, the other most common error is they try to wiggle it from the joint, which is not correct. The joint is, I mean, the finger is solid, the joint is completely lax, and it's only because you're moving your, because you're bending your arm that yes, it does happen to look, it looks like it's moving, it is moving, but I'm not moving it from the finger. I'm moving my arm and it's moving with it. So that's the other thing is that other thing where I'll show you this. It kind of shows you like, oh, my joints can flex and it's okay. My finger can stay put and my joints can flex and that's okay. So I think combined, those are really good exercises to do. Okay, cool. So it'd be nice. I actually was thinking in the summer. So in the summer for group classes, what I like to do is have a technique intensive where we don't have the stress of preparing for a concert, but rather we can focus on these different techniques. And I'm thinking of having, I think one of the classes should just be vibrato. And I want to feature my advanced virtuosic concert violinist teacher, Catherine Gilger, and maybe have maybe even more, maybe 2 weeks of vibrato or something where it's like, what is everything we can talk about in practice for it to help you guys. So, so I think I'm going to have that during the summer, I'm going to feature that and then as well as other techniques. So, but yeah, for now, I think we'll go on to our other stuff for the fiddle class. So yeah, let me get that ready for you now.